Stephanie, and thank you for your time on the PM News Desk.
Good afternoon.
We also have another guest on the line. He's Andrew Njuguna, a journalist on the ground in Burundi. Good afternoon to you, Andrew, and thank you for your time on the PM News Desk.
Good afternoon to you, and thank you for having me.
Andrew, let's start with you. What's happening in the capital right now? What do you see?
After an afternoon of celebrations in Bujumbura, after General Niyongabo announced that he had relieved President Nkurunziza of his duties, we've been woken up to sounds of gunfire and explosions, and then there was a quiet lull, and then this afternoon it started up again to what we now understand is fighting between two factions of the military, some that are pro Nkurunziza and the coup plotters. So the streets are very empty. The capital is very quiet, and I think residents are just staying in their houses just to see how it plays out.
Stephanie, you've just heard Andrew speak about gunfire, explosions, factional fighting now. Is Burundi teetering on the edge of what could be a very protracted, a very bloody power struggle?
Well, I think we're all very worried about that. I think yesterday when we first heard that General Niyongabo had made his announcement, it seemed as though he was going to be able to quite quickly take control and assert control over the city. Now, as Andrew says, there is contestation, and this, of course, is very, very bad for both Bujumbura and for the country. And so it's really a question of how long this is allowed to go on for, or whether one faction will take control over another. But clearly, protracted fighting in the city is a very bad situation.
All right. Andrew, we've heard conflicting reports that forces loyal to the president are now in charge of the country, but coup plotters, on the other hand, saying they're in charge. Can you confirm who's more visible at this stage?
Well, on the streets we are seeing soldiers, but we don't know from what faction they are coming from. And this misinformation stretches all the way to the media. We do not know who's in control of the national broadcaster at the moment. The fighting that was there in the morning and in the afternoon is said to be about the national broadcasting station, which no one has gone on air to say if they're in charge of it at the moment.
Let's talk about the army, Stephanie. They became a symbol of reconciliation in the aftermath of the civil war, and they do enjoy a healthy international image as well. But does it actually enjoy a broader public support based in the president himself?
Well, actually, what we've seen over the last 3 weeks of protests is that, in fact, the army has been, in a sense, protecting the protesters. We know that the police is seen to be on the side of President Nkurunziza, whereas the army has retained neutrality. Clearly, that has now changed. And the big question is, how many supporters are loyal to Nkurunziza and how many are loyal to General Niyongabo?
Are we likely to see some sort of regional military intervention anytime soon? We know Rwanda was quite concerned that the Rwandan Hutu rebels in the eastern DRC would take advantage of the chaos and then try to destabilize Rwanda.
I think it's very important at this point that if there is any kind of military intervention, and there has been no mention of that from anybody at this point, that it be a neutral one. And I think one of the problems in the Great Lakes, whether it's Rwanda, Burundi, or the DRC, or Uganda, is that countries have supported rebel groups fighting against regional governments. And so it's probably not a very good idea for there to be a regional force or a regional intervention, and especially not a unilateral one from a neighboring country like Rwanda. That, I think, would add to the explosive mix that we already see in Burundi at the moment.
All right, let's talk about who's actually behind the coup. We have Major General Godefroid Niyongabo coming to the fore now. We know that he's a former army chief. He was a former ambassador to Kenya, a former intelligence service head, dismissed by the president. He's not the only disgruntled general at this point, but clearly he's the most visible one right now. But how much of support does he enjoy in rank and file?
Well, I think this is fortunately not about ethnic politics, and that is one of the successes of Burundi over the last decade, I would say, is taking ethnicity out of politics and also out of the army. This is really about those who support President Nkurunziza's third mandate and those who don't. General Niyongabo clearly leads the faction that doesn't, and we know that the people in the streets who've been protesting for the last several weeks also don't support that. The opposition politicians don't support that. And so there is quite a large coalition to which the army has now added itself against against a third mandate for President Nkurunziza. International calls also for him not to stand for a third mandate. So there are many different voices against this third mandate.
Andrew, are you still on the line with us?
Yes, I am.
Andrew, when it comes to those protests, what are the underlying grievances of ordinary Burundians? What are their expectations right now?
We have to remember that this country went through a civil war for 12 years, a war that started in 1993 and ended in 2005 when the last rebel commander signed a peace deal. During this period, about 300,000 people lost their lives and many more fled to neighboring countries. The people that we've talked to on the streets, one, they are afraid of the country going back to civil war. They are tired. All they want is just good governance and development. And the upcoming elections or the scheduled elections looked like a good opportunity to build up on the country's democracy, which, as it stands now, look like it's just gone out the window.
All right, the electoral process really in danger. How do we get things back on track, Stephanie? What should the international community be doing and saying right now?
Well, I mean, we've seen general condemnation of the coup, and that is to be expected. Neither the UN nor the African Union cannot tolerate unconstitutional changes of power. But we also can't allow this situation to go on and on where we have fighting for control of Bujumbura. So at some point, those organizations are going to have to step in. They have also, though, spoken out against a third term for President Nkurunziza. Yes. So it is a very complicated situation. And one of the questions that we were asking ourselves even before the coup started yesterday is what organization, what individual can walk in here and be somebody who's respected by the various parties and actually mediate. And now, of course, that's become significantly more acute. But I think that if, in fact, we do see General Niyongabo succeeding in maintaining control, the best thing would be for him to hand over to some kind of civilian administration that would then rather quickly, once things have been stabilized, go to...
Hey girls! Here's what's...
What is Burundi's history? What is Burundi's record like when it comes to the military actually handing back power to civilians or to the people?
Well, this has been one of the big problems in Burundi. And so this is I think Andrew said it as well, it's a hearkening back to a very dark past, and it's evoking a lot of fears in the population. And so, as Andrew said, I mean, there were hopes that this could be the election that consolidates democracy in Burundi, and unfortunately things have gone very badly wrong.
Very quickly, before I let you go, Stephanie, how is the AU going to maneuver here? They are in a little bit of a tight spot. On the one hand, we have AU chairperson Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma slamming the Constitutional Court ruling and the president's controversial bid to run for the third term. But on the other hand, it simply cannot condone an unconstitutional change of government, which is happening right now.
No, you're absolutely right. And I think in either scenario, Burundi was on the verge of some level of possibly being suspended by the African Union. Now, of course, at this point, the idea is to engage Burundi and to engage the people who are now behind the different factions. And so I think sitting down and talking with possibly President Nkurunziza at the table as well is going to have to be the most urgent step that has to be taken.
Thank you to both our guests. I'm afraid we're out of time. Let's take a short break. I'll see you back after this.